and attendees should start coming in.
Can you mute everybody, or is that yours?
Yeah, generally. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We will start in a few minutes. You can absolutely hear my dog in the background. It is going to be tough to mute myself, so I will occasionally yell at a dog to mute itself. In the meantime, we will, of course, give it a few minutes as people join us, and we'll get started very, very shortly. Occasionally, you will also hear my wife yell at the dog. Her tone for yelling at the dog. Yeah, her tone for yelling at the dog is exactly the same tone as she yells at me.
I was going to say it.
All right, we'll give it a few more minutes as people can start streaming in. We'll give it just another minute, and then we will jump straight in because it's an exciting topic. It is very much the debate that I have constantly throughout my career. So, we'd be really excited to hear what our panelists have to say. And also, I want to encourage you guys as you're thinking about this topic, and I'm sure many of you, as you signed up, you would have been thinking about it. You probably have your thoughts and opinions. We'd love for you to share that. There is, of course, a chat window. There is a Q&A window. Please, by all means, put your questions in the Q&A. Sergio basically just posted that we really need some music. I really should work that out. I actually got this new tool, by the way. I'm not sure if you guys noticed. If you see the window, notice that there's a little bit of a, overlay at the bottom on my name and stuff. There's a really cool tool, by the way, all of you as pre-sales professionals, let me share. There is a really great tool called OBS, the Open Broadcasting Studio. It's a piece of software that's open. You can, of course, contribute to them. Really great tool. You can kind of plug in, music and like labels and overlays and stuff like that. So check it out. You'll for our next webinar, we'll make sure that we actually have some music in there for Serge. Yeah. Cool. All right. You know what? Let's actually get started because I think, we're at critical mass. So once again, thank you so much for joining us this evening. For those of you who are in New Zealand and Australia, and for those of you who are in Singapore, good afternoon. And for those of you who are in India, kind of good morning or just at lunchtime. So thank you for joining us, everyone. We are, of course, joined by a fantastic panel. Whoops. I wanted to actually expand this a little bit. There we go. A fantastic panel of individuals. We have the Super Director, Vice President Manager of Sales Engineering, Jordan Barker. Unfortunately, the slides got cut off, so we've promoted Jordan, which is great. Thank you to Diana Omuoyo, for being really tolerant as I totally misspelled her name 3 times. Thank you also to Serge Singh, who actually put his hand up first to do all the work. And then, so I'm gonna take him up on that and for next time too. And finally, my name is Paul Bathis, and we are part of the Pre-Sales Collective, as are all of you. And we're gonna get a chance to really be part of this community, especially in the APJ region. So thank you so much, of course, for making this possible. If you guys didn't take the time on a Thursday afternoon to come spend with us, then we wouldn't have this collective here. We wouldn't have the opportunity to share. And so we want to continue to make sure that you get the most out of today's webinar, this debate. Ask questions if you have them in our Q&A panel. You are, of course, part of the chat window. So make sure you be active in chat. You know, if you want to kind of post really questions in there or kind of post your opinions in there and get people to converse about them, I've got that window open, so I might pull some things that you're talking about as well and share it with the panel and see what their thoughts are. But, you know, I thought what would be really cool is we actually hear from each of our panelists. So why don't we start from left to right with our super duper director, manager, vice president of sales engineering for Alteryx, Jordan. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Jordan.
You're too kind, Paul. So my name's Jordan Barker, and as you mentioned, I run or lead the sales engineering team across APJ for a software company called Alteryx. A little bit about my background is I started from the technical side in customer support, moved through to the consulting arm, and then moved through to the pre-sales as an individual contributor up to manager.
Fantastic. And Diana, like, how was your journey into solutions engineering? Tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey too.
Great. So I'll give you guys a short version. Otherwise, I'm going to be talking for 45 minutes. So I actually started as a developer. So I'm more in the technical side of the house. And then, like, true to my, my portfolio, I not only changed jobs, I also changed roles throughout my career. And so went from developer, land and a whole bunch of other roles, and then ended up in performance engineering, which I loved so much. And I've done that for years, and I'm still a practitioner in it because once I moved into pre-sales, I felt comfortable in the APM space because I joke and say I used to be the human version of APM before they became cool. And so it still is my sweet spot. But in terms of how I got here, it's a completely different, it's a long journey. I should probably blog about it.
That would be wonderful. Actually, as you know, we do have a blog as well. So I will actually take you up on that for sure. And so Serge, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got here and your time here at Workday.
Sure. Sort of like Diana, it's been a long journey, I think. At university, I did computer science, so a developer, and I thought, there's no way I can do this for the rest of my life. I couldn't sit behind a computer programming, right? Then I fell into IT recruitment, as you do. And then I discovered this role where you can actually mix people and technology together. So that was over 10 years ago now. So I've been on that journey since and ended up at Workday about 3.5 years ago.
So what I also heard from your introduction, Serge, is that you can actually help us work out how to get our next job.
Potentially.
Potentially, maybe.
Yes.
All right, fantastic. So everybody, what we traditionally do, of course, is we'd love to hear from you. We've got a really nice poll here. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second so that you can actually see all of our panelists. But I also want to push this poll out because we want to know a little bit about you. So please go ahead. Tell us a little bit about yourself and the poll and, how do you classify your company? Because that would be interesting to know exactly how it is what kind of organization you belong to. Then let's also, of course, what role do you play? Because that'll be interesting to know, like, which area you come from. And then finally, what kind of, how do you classify yourself? Like, where do you sit? So we'll give it another 15 seconds or so, just to give everyone a chance to kind of respond. It's really interesting. We've got a really nice mix here. Fantastic. 5 more seconds for anyone else who wants to respond.
I think for the salespeople, we can go with the business or the non-tech. There's a question around roles for sales, a checkbox for salespeople.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Thank you, Jackie. That is a very good point. Our sales team are in fact part of a sales journey, of course. So thank you for calling me out on that, Jackie. That's very, very fair. So I'm going to end the poll now. And in fact, you should be able to see, let me share the results. And there you go. So the majority of us come from software companies. I love that. There's a couple of us from non-IT electronics companies, a bunch of us from non-IT companies. That's good to know. And then, of course, a lot of us are solution engineers, a few of us are industry specialists. And I thought that was really interesting because oftentimes our industry specialists know the industry, right? They may not necessarily are that deep into the product or the technology, but the industry itself. So that was interesting. And then finally, you know, how to classify yourself. I love that everyone thinks they're amazing, close to 50%. So out of the 5 of us on this panel, 3 of us at least think we're pretty amazing. And the 2 of us probably are not as sure. So fantastic. Let's actually throw the first question then. So to the panelists, you know, Jordan, let me start with you. Have you ever been, you know, has anyone ever labeled you as, you know, or called you too techy or not business savvy enough? Have you ever heard that?
Yes, I think when I initially came into the pre-sales organization, I think many of us on the call today, if you're an individual contributor, would the technical side is really table stakes. So if you're sort of the minimum viability in that role is to understand the technology and technologies that we may integrate with. So I think there is there's an aura around our roles where we are that's what we're expected to do. So I think maybe a tap on the shoulder in my earlier career that I went down a few rabbit holes that I shouldn't have. You know, didn't take the sign of the person across from the table, and that's really where that business IQ really complements somebody who's a little bit more from the technical side. If you can notice those signs, you can really deliver your message in a far more effective way. So I certainly got my fair share of taps on the shoulder.
Fantastic. And Diana, it sounds like, you know, you have a long story. Have you ever been classified as not business savvy enough or too techy for us?
Oh, 100%. And I think Jordan kind of alluded to it. As ICs, we're, I think, geared towards just delivering, right? So you go from point A to point B. There's a specific deliverable that you're working towards, and it's very channeled, right? And so coming into this space, I kind of did a lot of that. So I say in terms of like execution, you don't have to worry about that because I've got that covered. But then I realized, like early on, especially when I was trying to figure out what the technologies are, or trying to kind of ask questions of my customers, they're very, very close-ended, right? So it's a yes or no question. It's like, one pointer. And so kind of trying to shift that narrative to being a little bit more open-ended questions, have them talk a little bit more. You can see the comfort level for them. And I think maybe my background kind of made it sound like I was a surgeon, like questioning people and so on and so forth. So it was quite uncomfortable for both parties. And so, yeah, I can say that, yes, that was very, very clear early on as part of it. And it was pointed out a few times.
I've definitely felt it too, where, I've been, like you said, Jordan, tapped on the shoulder. It goes like, well, that's, you're too technical. You focus on the product too much. You don't understand what a customer is looking for. But it sounds like, when we have been caught, when we have been tapped on the shoulder and when we have been called up on certain things, a lot of us on this call, we come from the technical side. Serge, did you come from the technical side too? Did you kind of get tapped on the shoulder, and how do you kind of pick up the business side? Because I assume that in your current role now, even though as an enterprise architect, you do have to thread that line really, really finely, because people look to you for technology solutions that solve business problems.
Yeah, it was sort of the opposite problem for me coming, doing that recruitment type role where it's salesy, you're dealing on the business side. I had some very good managers that sort of built the emotional IQ component about reading people that you're meeting with and so forth. And then as I've transitioned across into, pre-sales roles and more technical roles because of my background, sometimes you get frustrated. You're like, why won't you leave me alone in the room with the client ever? The account manager feels like they have to be in the room. And it's because you have to build that trust factor that you're not going to say something that's going to ruin a process or ruin a deal, right? So it's a case of not only building up that skill set, but also building trust within the sales team as well. And one thing that I've sort of come across is it depends what type of company you're working at, right? Everyone's ticked software, but some of them are in a very early stage, like phase 1 of a company's life. And those companies tend to deal with, your early adopters. So you have to be actually more technical focused in those type of companies as a pre-sales person. Whereas if you're in a software company where it's a bit more mature, you're dealing with the larger, you've sort of gone through the first 2 cycles, and now you're dealing with sort of the conservative or the pragmatist type customers. So you have to be a bit more business minded as well. So I think it's a 2-factor where, one, as a pre-sales person, depending on the organization you're in, you can afford to be more technical than business if it suits that organization at that time. So I think it depends on your journey in terms of a pre-sales person and the type of company you're working for and the journey that company's on as well. Mute. You're on mute, Paul.
Silly dog, he's yelling in the background. I put myself on mute and I get all excited and I talk, and by the way, he's not barking anymore. As soon as I put myself on mute, he barked. Yeah, anyway. So it's really interesting that you talked about the maturity of the business. So I'm sure as we were preparing for the session, we talked a little bit about being part of the hiring process and so on. And I think some of you all, you've all been part of the hiring process before. Are you starting to see that there's a trend going one way or the other? Like, Jordan, let's start with you, since you're in a manager leadership position. Like, what do you see? What's the trend?
Yeah, I mean, so with Ultrix, I grew the team from 3 to 40 people in about a year and a half, right? And I think Serge's point is critical in terms of the maturity of the organization. So I think I'd ask everyone on the call today to think about on a scale of where their business is and their sales engineering culture as to the types of role that they hire for. So if I put myself in the shoes where we had 3, 4, going up to about 10 people, Serge mentioned that those individuals would be more technical minded. Okay, in my particular experience, it's actually, I prefer them to be closer to the middle. The reason for that is because in that startup mentality, you need to be okay with cleaning the floor of the office. So you need to roll with a lot of punches. And in my experience, to be able to do that and be comfortable with it, it requires a lot of emotional intelligence because you're dealing in a fast-paced environment, a lot of different stakeholders. You're being asked to do fulfillment. You're being asked to be a solutions architect, you're asking to be a sales engineer, and in some instances you may help out sales as well. So in my initial maturity period, I feel like it's important to have both qualities. Now, when we got to the stage where we were starting to become more mature, and again, to Serge's point around who we're targeting with our software, originally it was that SMB commercial space. Ultrix is a land and expand model, so it's very transactional. When we move towards more of an enterprise engagement, enterprise customers and businesses expect a different level of service. So a dedicated individual as a solutions architect with industry expertise. And with that comes the keyword that Serge mentioned in trust. So that customer who you're engaging with now requires a skill set of an individual as a solutions architect, or as somebody who's going to recommend on how they should build out a COE. And I think when you grow to that stage, you may have more of a luxury of hiring those specific individuals for those specific roles versus maybe an individual who would be able to do a mixture of both.
So that's interesting, right? Both actually, all of you mentioned trust, you mentioned EQ, which are, I guess you don't really necessarily place either of those two in either a technical bucket or a business bucket. But Diana, like, how would you, if you're coming in from a technical perspective and you are trying to develop trust and EQ, like how does that play out from your perspective? Like, what is it easier to learn those things from one side or the other, whether you're business side or technical side? What do you think?
Well, that it is, I think there's a lot of factors that can play into that. I can speak from my experience because coming in from an IC role, even then, I think I was in that position where I got to talk to a lot of different stakeholders within the company itself. And then I got to transition into consulting, which, equipped me with a little bit of those soft skills. So when it comes to now going in and talking to customers, I think having that balance between being technical in an IC space and having the consulting background kind of helps with that building of the rapport and the relationships. But at the end of the day, the way I like to work is I usually like to have one-on-ones with my core champions just to get to form that relationship and that trust and that bond, because then I feel comfortable and they feel comfortable working with me. And then at that point, it's just, you know, it almost becomes like two people just having conversations, and it becomes a little more open, right? And so in terms of, and I say, you know, you don't need an MBA to do the business side of the house, right? Because I thought, oh my goodness, I'm gonna have to go in and learn all of this stuff. No, I said, I'm just gonna use the skills that I have within myself and try to build those relationships and try to understand. Once you get the customer talking, you get to learn a lot more, right? And so it was, I think for me to get to that point, or for anybody that's looking to get to that point, I said, just shut up and listen, right? Once you've established the baseline, the customer will get to that point and they'll start to feed you information that you can then use, right? You get your aha moments, right? In the beginning, I missed a lot of it because, you know, as a techie, we're already mapping solutions to things. We're already, you know, doing a lot of that. But I think that kind of helps build that part of the house. At least that's what helped me. And I think I've spoken to a couple of people that were also very, very technical, and they kind of like maybe a little shy, maybe a little reserved. And I said, you know what, just let the customer do all the talking. You don't have to do much of it, right? But listen and understand what they're talking about. And then maybe try and, you know, have that conversation around them that's not too solution-based, right? Too product-based. Talk about, you know, use cases and talk about other things that are relatable to them, put things into context, right? And that's an easier way to kind of like bridge those gaps. And I'd say it's worked for myself and a couple of other people that I know. And, you know, hopefully, you know, some of the other folks on the call can agree. But I'm, you know, I'm interested to hear if somebody else on the panel has had.
One of the best feedback my mentor gave me at the time is people love the sound of their own voice. So if you let your client talk, you'll come out of it and they'll think they had a great meeting. And they'll also tell you a lot as well. But to Diana's point, you know, especially when we come from a technical side, we, like Diana said, we go into solution mode. We try to look for ways to solution this or the technical detail. Whereas when you want to look at the broader picture, you have to take a step back and see the overall impact, right? You don't want to go down rabbit holes and start solutioning. You want to have a look at the bigger impact on the business, what you're trying to sell from a solution perspective. How's it going to help the customer or the prospect at the time, and from the overall vision, right? And that's the mind frame that when you come from a technical angle, sometimes you don't get experience with, because you're always into a particular solution. How is that particular solution going to work from a technical and engineering point of view? And that sort of comes with time as well. I think, Diana, you know, the more of those meetings that you do, you get experience about, okay, no, those are the telltale signs I need to stop and go back.
And I think to Jordan's point, like a lot of it also depends on the audience, because I've had meetings with customers that are all engineers, and those are honestly my favorite, because you're just geeking out and it's a good time for everyone. But then that's not everybody that you talk to in a specific account, right? So then I think it's about understanding your audience, right? And tailoring the messaging or the conversation based on who you're talking to.
Yeah, I think a case in point that maybe everyone here can relate to is around verticalization. So hopefully everyone's had the experience where you've had you know, a seller or a sales leader come to you and say, look, we've got this you know, FSI client in insurance, you know, we want a specific demo and we're talking to an actuary, right? I get asked that on a common basis, and it's unfair for me to try and turn an SE, similar to Chris's message here, you know, try and turn somebody technical or more business minded into an insurance expert in the day before that meeting happens. So I think the best way to look at it, if you're in that particular instance, is to focus on some of the points that Diana and Serge mentioned around open-ended questions. And it's okay to say that you're not an expert in insurance. and let them and ask them to tell me about what you do day to day, understand that wider scope. And then, that technology is really the last thing you mention, right? Once you've been able to build up some of that trust, knowledge, and you're like, well, actually, maybe it can complement here, it doesn't work here. And as a result, even if you are technically minded and that conversation is uncomfortable, just asking a simple question and being honest can open up more doors. And like Serge mentioned, once you get more and more experience, that confidence builds up and will allow you to have more of those conversations and subsequently a bigger value add.
Totally. And I think you guys raised a really good point. And so, Chris, thank you for your question. And just as a reminder, everybody else on the call, there's a Q&A panel there. Just feel free to throw your questions in there as well. And we'll try to get to as many of them as possible. But I want to ask you guys this. Now, when we introduce ourselves, we kind of, it's pretty evident that most of us came through a technical route. And through our experience, through being tapped on the shoulder, through all those things, we've recognized that, we needed to change the way we were. Like, we started to blend, right? But do you think that it's actually reasonable for a business to expect based on when we were hired? So as you were saying, the phases of business, you start off small, you got to do everything. So you might have to be that mix. But as the business matures, maybe you start to look at someone in the enterprise space. And so you've got that dedicated field. Is it reasonable for businesses to expect that of us as pre-sales people, whether we're technical going business or business having hired for that and then expecting people to do technical things? What do you guys think?
I'll start with this one. I think because in the nature of like businesses transforming, you can't just transform the business and not allow your people to transform as well, right? Because if, say, for example, a company is going from the SMB commercial and and moving into a different space, that's a completely different skill set, right? As we've established. So if your people are they're good at what they do, right? It's going to take a little bit of time to ramp up in that space. And I've seen areas where that could fail because, you're right. You're expected to know all of the things as soon as you're thrown into the deep end, but it doesn't necessarily work. It doesn't mean that it's not doable. It's just identifying that. So I've seen organizations that have dedicated enterprise SEs and SMB and commercial SEs, and they find the right people for those positions. But then there's others where everybody does everything. And so I can't speak to which one works the best because I've been in both. I've done SMB and enterprise, and I have my preference of where I prefer to sit. And that's where, I move forward and I said, this is where I want to be. And so I'm kind of like mostly in that space. But like I said, if you're going from one to another, it's some of the skills are transferable, but it's not, it's almost like night and day. That's why we have enterprise SEs and then we have commercial SEs.
I agree. The skill set is a little bit different. I actually saw this firsthand at the last company I worked at, where we went through this whole digital transformation piece, and it was a hardware company. They sold hardware, and then now they want to be known as a software company. So not only are you trying to go through this transformation, but you're trying to change people that have been selling hardware products to sound more like software people. And it is, once again, a totally different skill set. So there was a lot of initiatives internally to try to get, working. It's a larger company, so it's not like, 2 or 3 people that are trying to change over, but it was more of a case of there's a large pre-sales team and they were trying to handpick to see which people could transition and help support that initiative without having to change everyone, right? Because like you said, it's too hard to expect everyone to change the way they work, because sometimes it's in your DNA about what you like and the way you work. So it's a case by case basis, in my opinion, about who would come along for the ride and is willing to change versus people who are sometimes set in their ways about how they learn and so forth, right? So it's a bit of a mixture, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think from my leadership experience, I've recently moved across to Singapore, and I used to work in the London office in EMEA, and one of the main things that I think is valuable to Chris's point and your point, Paul, around is it fair for a business to expect people to transition? You can't go against human nature, right? If you do, people are going to churn anyway, regardless. Okay. So I think as a leader, you need to be okay with that being the fact. But what you want to make sure, and I think it's only fair, and I read a story a few months ago of a boss that had to let somebody go. And that employee asked the boss, well, why didn't you tell me that was the reason, you let me go? You didn't give me a chance to be successful, right? So I think as businesses go through a transition, as a leader, what I try and do is increase all transparency from top to bottom as early as I have it. And my expectations of the journey that we're likely to go on this year. So, people can sign up, they can absorb that, because if you're more introverted, you're less likely to tell me directly on a call, hey, I disagree with that. You need to go back, internalize it, think about, is that for me or not? And subsequently people are going to either get on board or not. But as long as from a leadership perspective, I set up the best practice environment to allow them to do that, then I think it all just comes out in the wash anyway. So I think if businesses stand still, they die. So there's always going to be change. And I think that's the exciting part about our roles. The range of skill sets, if you're open to it, is endless. So, sales engineering or not, you have a very good base to move on if you.
Yeah. And one of the risks I took was I left a hardware company to go to a software company. And when I made that jump, most people said that's too hard, right? So it's one, you got to come on that journey and to be willing to be not only upskill yourself, but find a company that is also looking at people from different angles as well. Sort of to Jordan's point earlier, where when you get to a certain size, you can look at people coming in from different angles, right? They might have different opinions because they come from a different industry. So there's all these options available. I suppose it's just about going on that journey.
I think
Totally.
I want to add something towards it. So we've talked about the skill set, but then also when we look at the sales cycles, the sales processes, and all these things, they differ. Or at least I've seen them work differently in the different spaces, right? So if you're in the commercial, right, it's about volume. It's about, like you're saying, land and expand type of deal. So those move through a lot quicker than they would in the enterprise space, right? So on top of the skills, if the company is transitioning into whatever area they're going into, I think that's also a factor that needs to shift. And I think maybe in terms of keeping your people and hoping they don't run away and helping them transition with you is to come up with processes that can help, that they can start to adopt, that will help them get to that other space as well.
And that's really interesting because I think it's fair. Like everything that you said, businesses will change. Human nature doesn't change as quickly, so there's always a dichotomy, and at some point it'll break. But from your perspective, then, and I'd love to see, like everyone on the call, you've got your raise your hand option. Like, have you ever experienced this where you've joined a company and you've now been asked to do something that is not necessarily in your wheelhouse, right? Like, so either you're a business person or an industry focused person and you're now asked to go build demos, or you're a technical person and now you're asked to go run a workshop. Like, how many of you have actually kind of gone through that? Yep. Yeah, yeah, pretty much, right? I mean, that was kind of like a cheating question. Of course, all of us have. That's why we're here to learn about this. But let me throw it to you guys. Do you think it's easier then that as professionals ourselves, traditionally our industry has started with technical people and we've kind of learned the hard way, right? Yeah, I mean, even Serge, for yourself, you kind of went from tech to business and then you kind of came back a little bit. Like but I've noticed that there's a trend that, we're beginning to get to the point where there's not enough technology people who can do both, right? There's not enough amazing people who do both business and tech straight up out of the box. Do you think like, that that we should be looking at, hey, let's go hire business people and teach them technology, or should we go and hire technology people and teach them business? What do you think is easier? I know this is like on the spot moment, but this is a debate. You gotta have to choose a side.
Yeah, I think, well, if I speak from Alteryx's perspective, it's self-service. Like, we sell it as self-service, right? So actually, when we actually have our sellers do the demonstration of the product to literally see how easy it is, right? If I'm a seller, I can use this product. So can you in HR, or so can you. So I think there's maybe in my context in the Alteryx world, there is a psychological step where we expect more business-related individuals to use the technology. But if I maybe abstract away a little bit, in my experience, customers are actually asking more of a vendor. So rather than, I would like your software, can you tell me how to build out an analytics COE, particularly in my space, because it's moving so quickly. People hear buzzwords like ML, AI, they've been sold down the river here, sold down the river there. And what they actually want from a vendor is that general conversation around how our technology fits, what do you advise, what have you seen at our competitors. So I think in terms of the business adopting the technology in Alteryx's sense, I think it's advantageous. And if I look at some of the best sellers, they have built the muscle memory of what that product does, right? And personally, from my perspective, if you have muscle memory of doing something, you can relate that easier to somebody who uses Excel, because I've been there and done that, or SQL, I've been there and done that. And maybe that translates to App Dynamics and Workday, I'm not so sure, but I would see it as, depending upon the technology, it may be a little bit easier to adopt than that business nous, because I think that comes with experience.
We've just got a couple more minutes. So Dinah, I'd love your thoughts, and then I'll ask one more question. Go ahead. Sorry.
All right, no, cool. I was just going to say, like, 100%, it depends on the technology itself, because I was just thinking to myself, I'm like, if I look at the portfolio of the technology where it was last year versus this year, it's clear that we definitely need technical people that can keep up with this, right? Because the customers are moving, they're adopting all of this new stuff. We need people on the ground that can actually learn this and learn fast to be able to actually understand what the customer is doing. And so, again, personally, that would be an easier thing for me to do. But then I'm in a space where the field that I'm in is familiar to me, right? And so understanding the fundamentals of it is not hard for me, but I'm guessing if I went into a completely different area, like, well, not technical, I'm just going to pick security, for instance, right? I don't have a lot of experience there. I may have to actually rely on the business side, so to speak, like those skills to be able to actually hit the ground running as I upskill on the technology and all the good jazz. So again, it just depends on where you're placed and
Totally. And so look, I think in reality, even though we call it a debate and we kind of swing, and I noticed that it's been cyclical. The reality is that the real answer is, like, if we can find the perfect utopian blend of both, that would be amazing. Serge, not all of us come from both. What would your advice be, for someone? I know, Carly, you've raised this question. If you came from the business side, you wish you were more technical. If you're technical side, you're hearing from everybody, everyone starting off wishes they were more business focused. What advice would you kind of give us to kind of reach this utopian happy middle of amazingness?
It's a tricky question, right? Because I think, once again, it's organization based. If I use ServiceNow as an example, or Workday as an example, you've got two types of pre-sales role, right? You've got the solution consultants, and then you've got the architects. So, in the solution consultant world, you've got people from the business, because you need them to know the business, who go a little bit technical. And then you've got the architects who are technical, but you need them to go a little bit more business. So it's dependent on the organization you're working for. And I think both ways can work as long as you can go a little bit the other way. There's a pre-sales role out there.
The happy Venn diagram, the crossover.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. For example, if I had to do a solution consulting role, I couldn't do it. Whereas a solution consultant, if they had to do a technical architect, they probably wouldn't want to do it. It's too technical, right? So I think there's a happy medium. And as an individual, I don't have to be half-half in the role that I'm doing, as long as I can go a little bit the other way.
Any other advice, Jordan or Dinah?
For me, I think it's just a bit about awareness, right? Acknowledging the fact that both sides exist. So I have somebody who is all day long going to be, in R, Python, TensorFlow, heavy coding. That's what they really enjoy. And if I took that away, they would leave, right? But they're also highly, highly effective in those situations that Serge mentioned, right? So I can use them, or they can be used in very, very effective conversations. But I think the question from Davey is around how do you train like technical employees to be more business focused, right? And I think I can use this as a context. So this individual is very technically minded. A lot of my team are technically minded, but it's important, as I mentioned before, to vendors are asking, customers are asking us more about their technological landscape. How do you build out COEs? How do you develop this analytics landscape? And to be able to have those conversations, you need to have a little bit of a business mind. So what I've done and I build out is like a vision, right? So I've asked them, when you went to the shop, the last thing you bought in person, right? Why did you buy it from that person? Okay. You bought it probably because you trusted that person who recommended that perfume, or that car salesman who gave you all the features and functionality. So I think there's to put them in that shoe, even if they're technical, they've felt that trust from somebody they've bought it from. So just painting that picture of how they could add that to their game, right? Because I think in our world, we enjoy getting skills, right? There's more skills, the better, I think. And as long as you paint that picture, show some of the advantages, then they'll pick at the bits that they think they can, they find useful and can add to their game. And but I think it's around painting that picture. And I work with learning and development to build on soft skills like active listening. And but these don't come easily. So I complement that more monthly enablement with process that Diana mentioned earlier, right? So in our deal execution template, I ask them to put themselves on a scale of how much the customer trusts them. So it allows a little bit of self-assessment, reflection, thinking about how do I go from here to there with the customer, but it has to be daily reinforced to be able to move that technical house to the business house, just through gaining an appreciation of how difficult that is. And Carly's question in particular is useful, right? Because Alteryx is a very no-code, low-code platform, right? And now in my world, I actually, I'm actually attracted by somebody who's worked from a business perspective because of those customers coming to us and asking us, how does this fit in our landscape? Not, Alteryx, give me the software. So I think, I often refer to it to the word of know enough to be dangerous, right? So if you can understand the tech enough, and then you can always pull someone in. I quite like that balance. But anyone else got any comments?
Oh yeah, mine is just going to be a combination of what you both have said. So to Sergey's point, like there's definitely a role that fits people's interest within this space. So as individuals, when we go into this space, you have to be honest with yourself first as to what your preference is, what you want to be when you grow up, so to speak. And because I think I can speak from a technical perspective, when I started, somebody said to me, the analogy that they used was when you go to a doctor, when you walk into the room, they don't start prescribing medication to you. Well, some of them do, and please don't do it. But it's about, they want to find out what the problem is and so on and so forth, so that they can find you the right solution. And that has stuck with me. Every time I walk into a room, I'm like, okay, stop prescribing and just first of all, understand what's coming on the other side. So, and that helps build with those soft skills, because to Jordan's point, active listening, just shut up and listen for a second, right? They'll tell you exactly what's going on. And then learning to ask the right questions as well. And that comes with experience, that comes with time, and that comes with that trust between the two parties. Because if I walked into a room right now and I asked someone as nicely as I possibly could to tell me, what the password is to their production environment, they will never do, well, hopefully they will never do that. And hopefully they should never do that, even if we're close. But we should be able to get enough information for us to be able to build solutions around them that can help, not just technically, but also help drive the business. And the customers are demanding that, right? It's not just, I want a software that can do A, B, C, but they want to Jordan's point, a vendor. They want somebody that will be with them on the journey.
Yeah. So thank you so much for your thoughts, Jordan, Diana, and Serge. I think in reality, we knew going into this conversation that it wasn't really a debate. Yes, many of us come from technology because we started a while ago. There are new group of pre-sales professionals that are coming in because of the low code, no code environments that allows us to be very attracted to them because they've got this amazing business acumen. But in reality, what we're looking for is this perfect medium. And I think you guys touch on a number of points. This whole idea of start working on your EQ, start listening better, start understanding what our customers are looking for. And if we start to drive ourselves towards like a common goal, it really helps us as we progress either from the business to the tech side or from the tech side to the business side. And hopefully we get that perfect Venn diagram that Serge talks about. So, there's so many, I noticed there are comments in the chat window. There's still questions that we never got a chance to answer. This is really an interesting conversation, but we're nearing the end of our time. In fact, we've gone past by a minute. So I might have to cut this off here, but all of you on the call, you can continue this conversation on our Slack channel. So I would encourage you, by all means, please do so as well. I'm just going to share my screen again because I want to cover off some things with you. Here we go. You should be able to see my screen now. So, again, thank you so much. The PreSales Collective is just a community of all of us pre-sales professionals. There is a podcast that you can listen to. It comes out every Monday, so make sure you subscribe to that. That's very interesting, always listening to different people and their thoughts. I think I heard one recently about the real talk between that relationship between our sales counterparts and our pre-sales teams. Like I said, the Slack channel, please join that. In fact, there is an APJ group. And it'd be amazing. I saw your colleague from EMEA join us, so you're welcome. You're welcome to the APJ group as well. Join the group, be part of the community. It's consistently growing, and it'll be fantastic there. There are some upcoming webinars that we're also looking at in December and January. We're going to look at bringing dibs into our pre-sales teams, and not just from a leadership perspective, but also from peer perspective, right? We want to be diverse and inclusive and create belonging in an environment. And I think it's everyone's responsibility. So let's hear about how we can do that. And also, this is, we heard a little bit of Diana, Jordan, and Serge's journey of where they've come from, but we thought, let's talk about what else we can do. What options are open to us as pre-sales professionals in our next job. I'm pretty sure my manager would never want me to talk about it, but because we're a community, we can and we should. So, and if you're in a leadership position, there is also a pre-sales leadership collective. So a great area for you to join as well. So, check that out too. Then finally, of course, I'm actually really looking for some city leaders. So APJ as a collective is huge, right? Like we've got 2.5 billion people living in the Asia Pacific region. So I would really love to have some leaders for each of the different cities. So if you live in one of the diverse cities across, Asia Pacific, and you'd be willing to maybe organize a meetup for your city, please adhere to any of the local government rules around meeting up. And create a supportive community. Please reach out to me on Slack or on LinkedIn, and I'd love to kind of include you in that as well. So with that, thank you so much, all of you, for joining us today, and we'll actually see you in 3 weeks. Thanks so much, Jordan, Diana, Serge. It's been fantastic.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone else.